Well, we've been moving through our series on personal holiness and looking at different aspects and different categories, if you will, or areas of holiness in life, as it means to be set apart as those who were once not a people but now are a people in Christ. And this morning we're going to look at holiness in modern media. And we'll have a list we'll hand out later of what shows you can and cannot watch and those kinds of things. No, this is, I think I'm uniquely suited to address this, not that others wouldn't be, because I am a child of a very much media-driven age. I grew up with shows sponsored by the letter A and the number 5, Sesame Street, right? And Mr. Rogers, and grew up weaned on that. In my adolescence, learned to sing, I want my MTV, it's okay, yeah. And all those jingles are ringing around in my head. I remember when video killed the radio star and all those sorts of things. And my high school years, most of my friends and I would, our form of interaction and communication were movie quotes to one another, of all the very, deep and profound entertainment that we indulged in, and these sorts of things. So I know what it means to live in a media age. Sometimes you hear lectures on holiness in media. It's, some older saint who's never turned on a television. So we own a television. We have one. I use the internet frequently. And I have a BlackBerry on my hip for illustration. So we're going to talk about what it means to live in this context. So this isn't going to be a move to Montana and put your head in the sand kind of thing, because that I don't think is the response, because media was God's idea. Now, why would I say that? Why would I say media is God's idea? Because media is essentially the technical definition of media in general, or medium, media is just plural for medium, is a tool to communicate information. And the one who thought of using a tool like pen and paper to communicate information was God himself. So media as a holistic category cannot be just written off as wrong, but we need to look at what it means to have wisdom in it. So that's why, and we'll look particularly at Ephesians 5. That's where we're getting the idea of, we want to look at today what it means to be a wise people in our world. And I point you to the quote from Douglas Groothuis. He's a professor at Denver Seminary, wrote a book, one of the few Christian books looking at the phenomenon, the soul in cyberspace. And he said this: the compulsive search for diversion is often an attempt to escape the wretchedness of life. We have great difficulty being quiet in our rooms. Cyberspace may be the greatest temptation yet offered to humanity to lose its soul in diversion. And so that sort of was set that out at Groothuis' observation as a banner over sort of what we're going to look at today. And I want to look at media in the broadest sense, not just television or certain things, all of the media that God has permitted and that we have constructed in our world. And the concept, which is so profound, of another opportunity for humanity to lose its soul in diversion. Humanity has always been tempted to lose its soul in diversion. That's the nature of fallenness and suppressing God's truth and being foolish with speculations. But we have, it seems to be, an increasing acceleration of those opportunities to be diverted. Well, let's take a time looking at the introduction. Our time this morning is going to be a little imbalanced in that our introduction will probably be more than half of our time. And the reason for that is very intentional on my part, is that I want to wake myself and all of us up to the fact that we have a problem with modern media that needs to be addressed specifically and diligently and purposefully. We often assume it and just assume that the phones and TVs and computers and all that we have are just neutral, that we just have them and there's not any morality or value statements attached to them. That is absolutely false. And so we want to look at that and sort of dispel that. And I'll be quoting from some unbelievers, just making observations, but tying it in hopefully to our walk with Christ. And so the introduction sort of I want to summarize is that media is not neutral. It's not neutral. There are value statements attached to every medium that we use. And so we can define our terms and notice our categories briefly. In point A, the media we may use, published media, and that's just disseminating information for public viewing. So that's books, magazines, newspapers, and that would include online websites, blogs. So that's where I'm putting the category of published media. There's broadcast media, which is the dissemination of information via video or audio signals. So radio, television, YouTube, whatever, music, movies. And then communication media. And that sometimes we don't think of in the same category, but it really is it's a tool to deliver information. So telephones, cell phones, texting, email, social networking sites, Twitter, Facebook, on down the line. Those all would fall under communication media. We're disseminating information through either communicating. So when we talk about media, we're thinking of published, broadcast, or communication forms of media and the different things that we'll look at. Now, when I say media is not neutral, what I mean is the capacities that we may lose, or what, as Groothius put, the greatest temptation yet offered to lose our soul in diversion. How are we losing our soul potentially with the media that we have confronting us and with the opportunities that we have through the media? And so I listed seven capacities that we may potentially lose if we unthinkingly, unwisely, or foolishly embrace the media that we have available to us, particularly in the West. The first is properly humble self-awareness. And I guess some people are already giggling at Dershowitz's statement there. And just read that first. The goal now, it seems, is simply to become known, to turn oneself into a sort of miniature celebrity. So I guess Warhol was right. Everybody gets their 15 minutes in the future. How many friends do I have on Facebook? How many people are reading my blog? How many Google hits does my name generate? Okay, be honest. How many people have Googled yourself? See where you come up. I've done it. Visibility secures our self-esteem, becoming a substitute twice removed for genuine connection. How visible am I in cyberspace, in the world, in quotes? And so what does that fight against? And I put that in the title there, number one. What does that fight against as we are called as Christians? Humility. What happened to Galatians 6:11? If anyone thinks he is something, let him know what? He is nothing. As Paul's, coddling attempt at building self-esteem. He is nothing. And our published and communication media, as we have now more and more abilities to update and upload our own thoughts and thinking, deludes us into thinking that our thoughts and experiences are really that important. Not trying to be offensive to you, but they're not. They're really not that important. To a greater or lesser degree, of course. But in the general scheme of things, they're not, and they can delude us into thinking that. And so that fights against, for those of us who are a people who are called to be humbly non-self-aware, that we are to consider others better than ourselves, that we are to not think more highly of ourselves than we ought, and these sorts of things. That doesn't mean inherently that having a blog or doing that does that, but that's a temptation for us to go that way. One observer, Nicholas Carr, who's written a lot on technology, particularly about Twitter, says this: Twitter is the telegraph of narcissists. Not only are you the star of the show, but everything that happens to you, no matter how trifling, is a headline, a media event, a stop the presses bulletin. I thought that was an interesting observation. Most of the things you do throughout the day are marginally, in the context of other people's lives, irrelevant. And again, I'm not trying to they're important. God cares. And those around you care. The rest of us don't. And so Twitter is just the telegraph of narcissists. I think that's a good way to say it. It fights against our call to humility in Christ and our call to find our identity in Him and find our victory in His victory and not our own thoughts and experiences and cathartic sort of broadcasting. So we may lose properly humble self-awareness. Now hear me, I didn't say inherently, but it's temptation. Secondly, prayer, meditation, and contemplation. Now, why do you think that? What is it about modern media that fights against